Testing,
Where it's open, they had to close it off.
testing. Testing. It's so hot they won't work.
The picture, but him or her, the picture of the statue, is like an hour away. Yeah, I stayed, I didn't stay right there, so I stayed, where did I stay? Which hotel did I stay? I stayed in one of the Hilton,
Testing. Yes.
like Marriott or Hilton or something like that.
All right, it's 5:30, so we're going to start the meeting. We're going to start the meeting of Community Development, Economic Development, Parks and Recreation. Will you take the roll?
Mrs. DiGiacomo,
Here.
Mrs. Mills, Ms. Holman,
Present.
Mr. Timonier.
Here.
I would like to welcome Ivanka Hall from Northeast Ohio Community Resilience Center. But today we're doing things a little bit out of order. We're going to start with the city manager's report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will just run through some things really briefly just to give you an update on, obviously we've got a ton of stuff going on right now. So first off, I wanted to give you the stats for our code enforcement. Been extremely busy this month. For the month of June, 185 code enforcement letters and/or door hangers were issued. We had 40 rental unit inspections scheduled, and we are also still dealing with Harbor Ridge, which is occupying quite a bit of our time. There should be some other actions taken hopefully by the end of this week with that property. For the year, if we're keeping score, 485 code enforcement letters and/or door hangers issued, and we've had 171 rental unit inspections scheduled for that time period. Give you a plan or just a quick update on the master plan. It's ready to go now to the Planning Commission for discussion. They have that scheduled for the August meeting. The committee that we put together to review and help assist with the master plan has concluded. We've had all our public meetings on that, and so now the plan is ready to go to the Planning Commission for review. And then after that is approved by the Planning Commission, they will make a recommendation to City Council to adopt the new master plan. In the meantime, our zoning is underway. We actually had an update call today with our consultant, so that is moving along really well also at this point. For the Appalachian Community Grant Program, to give you an update on that, obviously you see the streetscape is well underway. We've moved over to the east side. They're moving very quick on the east side of the road now. And for the facade program, we've had 22 participants. 16 of those have been bid out and received. 3 contracts have been awarded and work has started. 13 contracts are scheduled to be signed the week of July 7th, so next week. And 3 projects unfortunately have to be rebid just due to the cost and redesign of them. And 3 project bids are due by July 15th. So we're well underway. With those 22 participants, we'll spend all the money that we have allocated for the program. You've also noticed Collins Boulevard has started, so that section is shut down on both sides. Had a little snafu at the beginning where they closed the entire area of Collins Boulevard, but in the plan set that was issued months and months ago, they were supposed to leave access to 2 of the businesses that are on Collins Boulevard. Just was a little quick snafu. They made the correction once we notified them that there was an issue there. So that project is well underway. So downtown has a lot of construction going on right now, and we're happy to see it, but when it's all done by the end of the year, it's gonna be a welcomed improvement. You may have seen that the governor announced brownfield funds were awarded. Our Ashtabula City Port Authority was awarded $743,184 for cleanup and remediation at the Tannery Hill property. This has been on our radar for a long, long time, waiting for an opportunity like this for grant funding to do that. So that project will consist of soil excavation, engineering controls, and implementation of risk management plan for the protection during the construction and excavation of all the workers in the site. We have somebody that is interested in doing a kind of a high-end destination lodge down there. However, I know that there's been people rushing to say what this project is without having any clue what this project is all about, and some even taking credit for the grant. This was through our county port, or this was through our city port authority who did all the work on this. And there will be public access to any trails. The city port authority owns that property and intends to continue to own the property even after the project is done. So I want to make that very clear. You may have also seen that we did receive the CDBG flexible grant for Rennick. That was for the improvements on their second floor. That was a total of $295,000. That has to be done by July of 2028. And then you remember we did the critical infrastructure grant for Holbert Hill. We just have too much going on right now. We're going to perform that project next spring. We'll have all the bid documents and everything ready by the end of the year, and we'll bid it during the wintertime in hopes of getting a pretty good price. But that project is going to be held off until next spring. That is my update for now.
Didn't you have something about garages?
Oh, yeah, if you want to talk about that now, that's fine, because we're moving the other moratorium, right? Okay. So as you know, we have a moratorium right now on accessory structures over to 200 square feet. We've had some pretty hostile issues with that at the window during the day, that, you know, we're not allowing people to do whatever they want with their property. It's becoming more and more of an issue. We had a little snafu with the county building department where they issued a permit without a zoning permit for construction, and a garage actually started, which then triggered everybody that's been told no about the garages up until this point. My recommendation for now, because we are almost done with the master plan and zoning is moving along, I would like to just repeal this ordinance and allow it to be as it is in our zoning. So Monday I will be recommending to council that we repeal that ordinance.
So do we have to vote on that to bring it out of committee?
I think it's just going to be part of my report and my ask, but I wanted to mention it to you guys in case you have any questions on it. As you know, there have been several people that have come to council asking about it, but at this point, we can let things go for the next 6 months, and I think we'll deal with the outcomes of it, and we'll have a solid plan in the new zoning to deal with all types of construction at that point.
Okay.
Okay?
Any questions?
Okay. Thank you.
All right, so now we have our special guest, Ivanka Hall, who is here from Northeast Ohio Community Resilience Center.
Hi there, how are you all? So we have a PowerPoint presentation, so I'm going to show it to you. Ohio State University is our technical assistance partner for this particular project. I'll introduce myself and my team. So we are part of the project team. The Northeast Ohio Community Resilience Center is the lead on this particular project. We are funded by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Like I said, our TA is Ohio State University, the Ohio State University, the Center for Hopes. And we also work a lot with Anthropocene Alliance and with some of the other departments at Ohio State, particularly the Civil and Engineering Department, who's been able to work with us on some of the geomapping of some of the things that we're going to talk about. So our agenda basically is an overview of the project. I'm Ivanka Hall. I'm the Executive Director of the nationally recognized Northeast Ohio Community Resilience Center. We are the first coalition in the state of Ohio to focus on the whole impact around looking at the social, structural, environmental, and behavioral determinants of health. So literally what we do is we're looking at how environment impacts health, right? And so our end result is what is the health of the communities when we're looking at these disproportionate impacts around environment. And so you all have some of the information, a couple of the sheets that I'll ask you about. The title of our project is Building Resilience in Extreme Weather in Northeast Ohio. What a great day to talk about building resilience in extreme weather. The day when in Cleveland it is 106 degrees. And so here I think when I came in it was 94. And so looking at, how people in communities are impacted. So basically looking at the project benefits in Northeast Ohio communities in the Great Lakes in 3 ways. For us, addressing the barriers to climate resilience and adaptation by investing in the climate literacy and public engagement. So we hosted a meeting at the YMCA last year with Ohio State University, and it was a packed house. And then we hosted a report back a few weeks ago at the library, probably about a month ago or so, probably 2 months ago. Time is kind of crazy for me right now. And so those meetings were a way for us to talk about the project, to get information from the community about areas that they thought were most impacted. And so when you look at the sheets that are back there, you'll see something that says like demographic information, which county are you in, which city do you live or work, and then it talks about like some of the priority areas. So these were the priority areas that came out of those conversations. So from the community members that were there, they said, look, these are some of the, it's on the back table if there's any more back there. And if you need one, I can give you mine. Here you are, darling. You're welcome. And so for us, this builds on the long-term capacity for community-based organizations to implement climate resilient solutions, including building coastal resilience hubs. So the end result of all of this is we want our communities to be best prepared for emergencies, particularly around weather, whether it's extreme heat or extreme cold or extreme rain. How can we make sure, and I know you all are from the emergency management office, and so looking at when we were at the last meeting, I know that the Nature Conservancy was there, and they're actually in the talks to build some type of hub here around resilience. And so we had some questions for them around the hub, and they're part of our resilience ecosystem. And so hopefully we can get you all to be part of this also. Okay. This grant period for this is October 2024 to September 2027. And as you know, within this whole federal the systems that are going on right now, what we hope is that we'll be funded to address some of the issues that communities looked at. So if they said, hey, we need to do something about this, that will be be able to be funded for it in the next iteration. But right now, with our federal dollars, we don't know what iterations look like. We used to could guarantee that at the beginning of the year, things would be issued and we'd be able to apply for other things, and you all know exactly what I'm talking about. And I'm sure the city manager does too. What is climate resilience? So for us, it's the ability to prepare for, recover from, and adapt to the impacts of natural hazards. This is called resilience. And so we look at this whole thing around BRACE, building resilience against climate effects. And so how do we make sure that we're building resilience against climate effects with communities that are impacted? Basically, it's projecting the disease burden, which I talked to you about earlier, forecasting the climate impacts by assessing vulnerabilities, projecting the disease burden, assessing the public health interventions. So what public health interventions do you already have in place? Developing and implementing climate and health adaptation, and evaluating the impact and improving quality of activities. So do you have the things that you need in order for your community to survive in severe weather situations? That's what embrace means, right? And so for us, looking at these natural hazards, so these are these natural events that have the potential to cause harm to humans, to our infrastructure, and to our environment. This project area that we're covering in this particular grant is Ashtabula, Cuyahoga, Geauga, Lake, Lorraine, Mahoning, Medina, Summit, and Trumbull. But my team works to cover all of Northeast Ohio. So we cover from Lorain County all the way to Youngstown every single day. I've been doing this for 15 years. I've been doing this work for 32 years. And so for us, part of this is this toolkit. Like if you want more information, or if your city manager wants more information about the climate toolkit, it's toolkit.climate.gov. Hopefully it's still there. A lot of things have changed in the .gov world too. And so looking at, some of the things that we have been able to accomplish and where we're at, building teams and developing these community advisory boards, looking at our preliminary data and analysis and community conversations, which was a conversation that started last year, and then looking at these community-driven analysis. So the things that you all said, these are the things we need, going back and then taking that back and then comparing it with these geospatial maps. Because we know that we don't always get it right when we're looking at things from a computer, right? So the community may say, we're having this problem, and the computer says, well, the problem is here. Well, the computer didn't talk to y'all. So that is, the hardest part about all of this is making sure that we're making sure that the needs of the community are prioritized. And so between November of 2025 and 26, our focus has been this community-driven data analysis, looking at the risk matrix, and then developing these story maps around communities and doing these report backs. So we have been doing quite a number of report backs in these communities. Over last year, we had about 168 participants in the summer of 2025, looking at coastal resilience education, the surveys that they completed and the assessments, and then having these community conversations, literally working with communities so they can understand the exposure, the risk, and then investigating some of the options that were available for them. And so for this, all of this is looking at what the risks equal for us, the potential for negative impacts as a result of natural hazards in our community, and then understanding what our vulnerabilities are. So when we look at the CDC and look at our overall vulnerabilities, we're looking at the poverty level, the number of people that are unemployed, the housing cost burdens, whether people have a high school diploma, all of those things impact whether you can live if there is an extreme hazard, right? And that means that you may have people who are unhoused. How are they surviving? And I know earlier we talked about, do you all have extreme weather station? Do y'all have a place right now for people to go when y'all have extreme weather? We have extreme weather today. So do we have a place, a cold weather station where people can go in and get air conditioning here in the county? And then looking at household characteristics, looking at the number of people that we saw were usually age 65 and older. We saw some people who were 17 and younger, civilians with disabilities, single-parent households, English language proficiency. So these are the vulnerabilities that we're looking at. Now, I can tell you about some of the vulnerabilities for your area because, part of the vulnerabilities of your area is that a large percentage of your population are age 43. So you know that age 38 is middle age. So in case you didn't know it, you know it today. So when I found that out, I wanted to cry. And that your poverty rates here run about 15.2 to 17.6%. But when you look at the overall poverty rates for the state of Ohio, your poverty rates are about 3% higher than the state of Ohio. And if you're looking at some of the urban communities, their population's poverty rates are running about 28%. So you have a small urban community here, but you have a high poverty rate for the people who live within that urban community. And then when we look at the national poverty rates are about 12%. So your poverty rates are still running about 3% higher than the national average here. These social vulnerabilities are looking at income, children under age 5, and people who have disabilities. So when we look at children under age 5, we may have children who are asthmatic or have other types of health conditions or have high incidence of lead poisoning, right? So you may have some other issues that are going on with children or low-income communities. And then also with people with disabilities. If they had to get out of a building, like we were in one of the spaces, and the seniors with disabilities were living on the 22nd floor. And it's like, okay, well, if the electricity goes out, how will you get to the first floor? And how will you be able to get to the services that you need? So looking at these community conversations and the 168 participants, we looked at the percentage of people who were here. And then when we look over at Ashtabula, so you see the community representation, and we had about 10% out of the 168 came from Ashtabula. I think that's Ashtabula, that's that 10% right there. And so the survey participants were primarily working or retirement age. They were homeowners and those who have lived in the community for over 10 years. That's important because they have stake in the community, right? Because they've lived here long enough where most people aren't leaving. And so if they're not leaving, then how do we make sure that they're safe while they're here? And then when we looked at these results, some of the things that stood out across all of our participants was this whole thing around flooding. And so you see flooding circled and extreme heat. Those were two of the things that stood out. Like, they were adamant about, like, we get a lot of flooding in Ashtabula. Like, what can we do to alleviate some of the issues that are going on around flooding and how it's impacting our homes? The other was extreme heat. Even though it's up here as a priority, most people said that they could survive extreme heat in Northeast Ohio. I don't think they meant today, but they said, you know, we're pretty good around extreme heat. And then, you know what, the crazy part about it is, I think in my almost 59 years of life, I think this has completely changed. Because I think that in the past, we would have talked about extreme cold being a whole big issue around community members, because we're like, we want to make sure that, you know, schools are closed, you know, that, you know, people have a way to get food and all of those other things. But when we talk about flooding, we talk about the damage that it does to your homes, right? And so we have literally people who have mold in their homes as a direct result of rain. We have homes that need roofs as a direct result of all of this torrential rain that we have received. Like, how many people are tired of the torrential rain? I want it to rain, but I don't want a tsunami every day. And then flooding in Northeast Ohio. Flooding was generally perceived by community experts as happening sometimes, but getting worse over time, and somewhat to extremely harmful to communities. And the specific locations were identified, and they identified it on the sheet that you have. And I'm sorry, I don't have the sheet anymore, but it's identified, you all identified the places here that you said had some issues around flooding. And it is Geneva, Coles Creek, Harpersfield Township, Austin Township, Grand River, Rock Creek, Main Avenue, Ashtabula Town Square, Bridge Street, and Jefferson. Anything that's different that's not on here, write it on here so that when I leave, I can take it back and we can add it. The other was extreme heat. Extreme heat is generally perceived by community experts as happening sometimes to often, but getting worse over time and of significant harm. But really, they looked at the whole thing around flooding as more serious than extreme heat. And I think that it's the time of year. Like, when you're in the middle of a situation and, you know, and it's flooding, it was raining during the times we were having conversations. So I think people thought about that more, and it was getting ready to get cold. But I think that if we did a conversation now, people would talk about the heat. They would literally change on us. And so this other thing that we did was we created these story maps. And so the story maps to resilience, and you all have access to this information. So looking at, you know, what was going on here, for us, the highest flood risk and social vulnerability was Geneva, looking at Willard Creek, Krause Creek, and then looking at high risk, which is Harpersville, Grand River, and then Rock Creek, and then Ashtabula, looking at Lake Erie and the Ashtabula River. I think they were talking about like some of the flooding that happens along that river area, that people were having a hard time with that. And so that came up for us here. The other thing for us was looking at this assessing vulnerability risks. We are hoping to be able to incorporate like all of the things that you all tell us. So if you add more to it, we'll incorporate it into our findings so that when we go back and then they GI spatial all of this information, they'll put it on there. And then when we come back to say, look, these are some of the solutions that you all wanted to talk about, which was on this page. So these were some of the potential solutions that came up in the meetings. They talked about having rain gardens, mold remediation, improved storm drainage, home repairs. We also had an issue around some of the farms, I guess, that a lot of people's roofs on some of their barns, they were having some issues with. So that came up in our last meeting that we had at the library. Educational resources were definitely needed, particularly around flooding. One of the things I talked about is that a lot of homes here are older homes, and because they are older stock homes, one of the things that they do with older stock homes that they don't do with new homes is where they put your gutter systems. So new homes, your gutter systems are literally, they create a Y and push them away from your house. So the gutters are not based right at the base of your house and going right down into the drain right at your home. So they're usually moved away from your home for newer homes. But when we look at the older home stock, housing stock here, what we see is these old things. So we have gutters that go down into a concrete slab, and usually those are broken down in the ground. And so that means that all of that water ends up in your house. And so that means that the more rain you have, the more likely you are to have flooding. And then less likely you are to be able to use your entire home. And everybody wants to use their whole house. And then looking at the disaster preparedness plans. What plans do you have in place that can address the disasters? Improved infrastructure was one of the other things that came up. Funding for cleanup. Like, we've had these issues, and now for a lot of the residents who we talked about having poverty issues or seniors don't have the dollars for the cleanup. And so how do we make sure that the cleanup is happening? Working within coalitions. If you don't have coalitions here, like how can the coalitions best work together? Road conditions and notifications, having a way to be able to say, the road up the street is closed, where something goes out in mass to the community. So do you all have a system that sends out messages? Okay. And so making sure that people know that, because that came up a couple times too. Community safe spaces, like where do people go when it is time of extreme floods? Cooling stations, making sure that you have cooling stations in extreme heat, and having cooling stations that are within the communities. I know that the Nature Center the Nature Conservancy talked about creating this hub, but they were talking about the hub being 20 miles away from the community. And so it's like, okay, well, how are they gonna get there? And so he said, well, we can do buses. Well, we already know about buses in Hurricane Katrina, where the buses were. The buses never got to the people to move the people to the stations. And then air conditioning. How many people have air conditioning? And if you do, can you afford the air conditioning? Because air conditioning means an extra cost. So if you already are having some poverty issues or payment issues, are you going to be able to afford air conditioning? Or just being able to afford the device in itself? Shelter for elderly. You know, how do we make sure that if there are times of crisis, that elderly members of our community have a safe place to go, have a place where they can put their medicine, because a lot of people have medicine that has to be refrigerated. And if you all don't know, I know that throughout Ohio and across the country, because of these extreme heats, they've been doing these rolling blackouts. And so just think that if you're part of this rolling blackout and your medicine is in your refrigerator and your refrigerator is now not working, or you are on a defibrillator and it is connected to your phone services, and your phones are different than stuff that used to be. And then shelter for unhoused individuals. That came up a lot because we have a high, because you have a high poverty rate, you also have a high rate of people who are unhoused within the community. Solar infrastructure. Do you have grants and things that are available in order to help people be able to get solar? And green rooftop infrastructure, which we see usually at a lot of like the city buildings or the county buildings or the metro parks, where they now have these like green rooftops where they're able to like grow things, where people can have things to eat during times of crisis. Educational resources. Do you have educational resources that aren't just available online, but are available, you know, where people can pick them up in city offices too, so they'll know resources are available. Tree coverage is a big one for me. What I tell people all the time is, if you want to know if a community has a tree canopy, ride on the highway, because the highway tells you a lot. Usually when I'm on the highway and I see lots of trees and I don't see the houses, I can tell you that I'm in a suburban area. As soon as I get to an urban area, I see people's rooftops. And as soon as I see people's rooftops, I know they do not have tree coverage. And so that is one of the things here. When I came in, off the highway, there was a tree canopy. But when I got here, there is not. You know, you can literally see people's rooftops. When I'm in a plane and I fly a lot, I can literally look down and see which areas are underserved communities, because all I see is brown. I don't see trees. And then a lot of times people think that things are trees that were weeds that have grown into trees, but they're not trees. Y'all know what I'm talking about. The thing that never gets cut. educational resources, disaster notifications, making sure that notifications are available for the community. And then the other thing is this whole, like, how do you create these resilience hubs? So my organization has been working with the 9 counties on this Northeast Ohio Community Resilience Hub ecosystem, which is this sheet. And so we have been working as a vision for resilience in Northeast Ohio. It's for community-based organizations in Northeast Ohio to connect with government agencies, universities, and non-government agencies to understand better how to implement nature-based adaptation strategies to protect against climate change and extreme weather. How do we do that? We have a faith-based board. So we have one that includes churches, because one of the things that we know all of these communities have in common is there's a faith place, right? And so that means that if the churches are able to be utilized as hubs, it's a place where people can go that's right there in their community. So if something happens, they know that it's a neighborhood church, that they can go to that space. The other is creating this Emergency Resilience and Preparedness Council. And I'm hoping that I can get you all from EMA as part of that council. So the council brings together government and non-government to provide guidance, technical expertise, and resources to help communities be resilient as a result of change to climate and extreme weather events that impact communities. And so for us, we're trying to figure out what's the emergency plan and where is the community at in that plan? Because it's great to have a plan, but if the community doesn't know what the plan is, then something happens and the community's like, well, nobody told me. And so we want to not have that here. And for me, it's all about how do we save people's lives. The reason why the Northeast Ohio Community Resilience Center is so adamant about this is because during COVID, I went to the school systems and asked if they would put, what were they doing to make sure that kinship care families had food? Because a lot of kinship care families are families that have an older adult that has children, right? So you are a grandmother that has your grandchildren. So that means that you might have comorbidities. You might have diabetes and hypertension and some other things. So if something happens to you, what's happening to your babies? So your babies will be thrown into these systems. And so when I went to the schools and said, so what are you gonna do to make sure that school foods get delivered to those families? And they're like, yeah, we're not in the food delivering business. And I'm like, huh, are you serious? They said, well, what we're concerned about is, the people need to get here the best way they can. Like, that was the response in Cuyahoga County. And so I'm sure that would be the response in a lot of other counties. And so I started a food program out of my house. And so my house is really big, and I'll kind of talk to you about where I sit at. And I live in Cleveland, in the city. And so my house became a giant warehouse, my whole entire house. And we sent out 250,000 meals to disabled children and their families with no government support. So literally, it was the community saying, we gotta save the community. And that's what happens during times of crisis, is that the community says, what do we do as a community to make sure nobody is left behind, right? So we did that, and we also created our own vaccination clinic, and vaccinated more than 1,000 community members who were not able to get to the regular vaccination clinics because they were not close to their neighborhoods. So I went into agreement with Medic and said, Medic, I need y'all to come do this for me, and they came and did it for me. And so they came and did our vaccination clinics for our community members. And so that has been important to this work of the Community Resilience Center. And so for us, we hope that if you are not involved, if you are an individual and you want to be involved as part of the CAB, you can, because we also have the Community Leaders Advisory Board. So you are here, which means you are interested in things that are going on in the community. So guess what that makes you? That makes you a leader. And so the Community Leaders Advisory Board is a network of trusted community organizations and community individuals who are participating with us to amplify our outreach efforts, to uplift community voice, and to help shape strategies that advance our resilience, health, equity, and well-being of local communities. They're the people that care. They care enough about the community to say, I need to speak up about the issues. I'm gonna give you your sheet back. And so for you, with the questions that I'll ask you to think about and to hopefully on your sheets to include for us to take back is, what are we missing? Are we missing anything, or have we captured your concerns? Are your concerns included in what you see? Are there any high-risk areas that we should make sure to be included? If they're not on that sheet, to include them on the sheet and make sure that you give them to me before I leave out, or even just give them to someone later on and I can get them from them. What information would be most helpful or useful for us going forward, for you going forward? Like, what do you need from us? And how would you prefer this information to be delivered? Do you want it by mail? Do you want it by email? Do you want it by snail mail? Do you need me to drive it here? What is your top priority? And we also have a community engagement director. And so he's out in the community at a bunch of different health events. And so he's always within our county range. Like, he's always driving somewhere. And what possible solutions do you think we should prioritize? And so that was that whole prioritization of these solutions. We haven't prioritized them yet. We listed them, but we want you all to prioritize them. And who else should we talk to that maybe we haven't? That's important, is making sure that everybody is included. We talked about your area. This is the solutions thing I just talked to you about. This was the brainstorming, and that was it. And so this is the county specific. So this is Ashtabula. So this is your county, total population, almost 100,000 residents. I talked to you about the communities of color and the low income communities, looking at people with disabilities, looking at the number of renters. You have about 11% of your community members are renters. The average for Northeast Ohio is about 14%. In Ohio, it's about 13%. The average flood risk is about 63. In Northeast Ohio, it's 38 and then 45. And so out of 100, yours is 63, which you have a pretty high risk. And I think it's because of so much water surrounds you. And then the average risk of floods and of average heat is 37 until today. And then the average winter weather is, we're looking at your risk as 88 out of 100. This is, Ashtabula has higher rates of individuals with low income and disabilities and a higher flooding and winter weather risk compared to Northeast Ohio and the state as a whole. And then we talked about the social vulnerabilities. And so this talks a little bit about the areas that were chosen. So all the areas that I kind of talked about, this is the whole list that people, that they looked at and said, like, look, these are some of the things that are going on. And they kind of named them out, like tree cover, the desire for more trees to help improve air quality. The other thing about Northeast Ohio is our air quality is so poor that we have had these early warnings around air quality because of the number of asthmatics that we have in this area. Why is that alarming? Because of the number of children that we have die in Northeast Ohio every year from asthma-related incidents. And then, and I know y'all like, girl, shut up, we ready to go. And participants, we looked at the 17 participants. Out of that, about 47% owned their homes, about 37% were renters, and about 18% were 65 or older. And that is, I think that's it. And then also with your thing, talked about flooding and extreme heat. So yours came in the same exact way as the others. And then looking at flooding is generally perceived as community experts as happening sometimes, but getting worse over time and somewhat to extremely harmful to communities. And that, I mean, it came up so much. And then looking at, you know, the same areas that we kind of talked about earlier. And then what the perceptions are for the community. Locations identified included parks, houses without air conditioning. You have a lot of old houses, which means you don't have central air in those houses. Homeless and elderly communities and schools, you know, because if you have an older schools aren't equipped with air. And frequent community harms were related to health issues. And remember, all of my work all goes back to health. So whether I'm talking about the social, structural, environmental, or behavioral determinants, I'm looking at health. Like, in the end, what are your health outcomes for your community? The other thing that we talked about are this poor air quality, no access to cooling stations. The poor air quality was vitally important because you have a lot of people that also, because they're elderly, have other risks, which means heart disease, stroke risk. And so when we start having, so remember when the Canadian wildfires came and we thought that all our whole neighborhoods were on fire? We had all of these people who were in the emergency rooms because they were having heart attacks. So we had a large number of community members who had heart attacks and strokes during that time because they literally couldn't breathe. Because remember, they're already in communities that don't have tree canopies. Because a tree in your community, having trees in your community means you have an umbrella. So a tree is like this, popped up over you and keeping all of those contaminants off of you. So when you look around and you don't have trees, then that means all of the things that are coming from your highways and from the air, like all of those things, are disproportionately impacting your communities. And then we looked at these temperature changes over time. So this is what we see. And you're probably like, why is she bringing this up now? It's been hot for a long time. It's been raining for a long time. The reason I'm bringing this up is because if you look at in 2000, if you look at 1960 and you look at like the number of days when we had like these extreme weather events, you see how low that is? So if they're projecting that as we go, that we're gonna have more and more extreme weather, which means that we have to be prepared for those extremes. Because if we're not, that means that people will die. And that is why we were funded to do this work, because I can tell you, I think I'm the best at what I do, because I do it every single day. And so looking at the communities, Jefferson was the highest risk community. Looking at, what's going on with Jefferson, that was our number one when we looked at heat risk and social vulnerabilities. When we looked at pervious surfaces, the places where we see a lot of flooding, the lack of tree coverage, Jefferson was number one across all of those. So if you live in Jefferson, that is where all of those things were going on there. And what places are most important to your community. Think about places where the community frequently gathers or depends on. Like as you're like thinking about the things that are going on in your community and you're writing stuff down, go, oh, well, this is the place where people are. Think about playgrounds, schools, community centers, our sports fields, and other locations. I know we can't put trees in a ballpark, but we can put trees around a ballpark. And that way, when people are sitting there in the stands and they're watching their kids, that all of that heat and all is not right there on them. And what other support or resources would you like to see in the community to make it more resilient? We know that teamwork is important to building community resilience. And are there any collaborations or teams that you would like to see formed to help community reach its goal? And again, I think that's it. So the summary is looking at flooding, the highest flood and social vulnerability risks, looking at where they are, looking at extreme heat, the highest risk, and then looking at this extreme winter weather. The snow at East Harbor came up a lot. It needs a shelter for elderly and for other unhoused individuals. And that is it. I am Ivanka Hall. I am the original Ivanka. I am the executive director of the nationally recognized Northeast Ohio Community Resilience Center. And I hope that you have found this presentation informative and that you will indeed fill out the form and turn them back in and put the things that you need. And if you have any questions for me, you are more than welcome to ask them.
Can you go up to the speaker to ask, just so we all hear?
I can talk loud enough for you to hear.
Well, it's for the,
Recorded.
it's for her tape recorder. Sorry, Marty.
I bet you ever do. I just wanted to know whether or not you had we had access to do you share your PowerPoint?
Yeah,
So we could have,
Stacy, you can share it, yeah.
okay. And we did a sustainability study, I want to say 21 maybe. And one of the top solutions was tree canopies.
Yeah, I wanted to stand up and clap when you said tree canopies. It's been my pounding drum.
And I think for most people to realize that the bushes that we see are not trees. Because sometimes we'll see like all these things, and we're like, oh, it's a whole bunch of trees over there. And it's like, no, it's a bunch of weeds. Like, no, it's a bunch of stuff that grew up to kind of look like it might be a tree, but it's not a tree. And so it doesn't provide you the things that trees does. And then also remembering too that, because I know since so many people are homeowners, they're really fearful about getting trees put in their yard, but you can actually get tree coverage from trees that aren't as deep into the ground with their root system, and you get the same type of thing. So they can plant, like, definitely you need our maples and our mighty oaks near our highways because those are important. But in your neighborhoods, you can have other trees that actually still provide the same thing, that you don't have to worry about, did they wrap around my pipes, you know? Or am I gonna look up and I have to dig up my whole basement because now I got a tree growing in my house? So, you know, so definitely understand that.
Yes, thank you for coming.
You're welcome.
Yes. Mr. Manager, is there a requirement for people to get permission to plant trees on their property?
On their property, no.
Okay.
If it's something in the tree lawn, we'd like to know about it, because that becomes our responsibility. We believe, and this is some discussions we have in the new zoning, we want to make sure people are planting native species. So we're going to be looking at those, and then, of course, trees that are conducive to being closer to the roads where there's power lines, so we don't take out power and all that fun stuff.
That was my next question. Is there a list of trees that homeowners can access to know what to plant?
Yeah, I think right now the best bet is to look for the natives to the area. And then once we get the zoning together, that is a topic that we've been discussing. Should we put a list in here, either saying just native to our area or actually calling out what specific trees we'd like to see in the community?
Okay.
And
And-
then making sure you get the male and female trees, because
Oh.
the females are your flowering trees.
There you go.
And so, you know, the reason that we don't see apples anymore is because we have male trees and not female trees.
Interesting, never heard that.
Oh,
Yeah.
wait, back up there. So there, apples, you have male and female apple trees?
And all of them, like, in order for them to actually bear fruit, they're a female tree.
Oh, go figure.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, just like us. We are the earth, like,
Yeah.
all for real.
So I have a few questions, and I may have missed something in your beginning comments. So you kept saying that we discussed, when we discussed. Who is that?
The
What
community
happened?
members. So the community members came out to 2 conversations. We
And
had-
when was that?
So we had one last year, so that's what I went across when I went across the timeline.
Uh,
So we hosted one at the YMCA, and you were there at the YMCA, and we hosted another one at the library, and that's where I met you. We're at the library.
And so how are those advertised?
So we sent out information to
Okay.
the community. We used social media. We
Okay.
sent invitations to all of the council members. We sent it to the mayor's office for all the communities. And then we actually had a person, our community engagement person, that came out and leafed different areas, like
Go
just
figure.
walked around and passed out information to the community.
The other question I have is the grant. What is it for?
So our grant, Building Resilience, so it's actually what I just talked about. It's going out.
You
to
talked about a
community.
whole lot.
But the main thing I talked about is building resilience. So our program was to go out to the community to find out what the issues were with the community around this extreme climate, right? And so
Okay.
remember, our focus is around extreme climate.
Right.
And then to take that information back and then to figure out, like, what can a community possibly do with their solutions? So we're still working on the solutions now. The community's working on those.
The communities were, and this is another avenue to work on solutions. And so the grant is for you to do what you're doing, so we can then have information to do what we need to
And then
do.
hopefully we'll have, that we'll get the next round of dollars in order for, like, if you all decide, oh, we want to work on trees, then we'll give funding in order for the tree
Oh,
canopy
there
to
you
be
go.
worked on.
There you-
So that was one of the other things. And the other one was around, like, some of the people talked about flooding, about having rain gardens. So we looked at it and said, okay, is this something that's possible for us to actually do? We've also done, like I said, we've done other areas where we actually did some testing of, like, some of the water, particularly like groundwaters, to find out, like, were there hazards that were in the community. We haven't been able to do any testing here because it costs $100,000. We did the testing in Maple Heights, Garfield Heights, Warrensville Heights, in the Cuyahoga County area. And what we found was high concentrations of lead and manganese. Why is that so alarming? Lead, with children, we're talking about neurological issues, right? But lead actually impacts you across your lifespan. So 95% of adults have lead in their body, is where it chooses to land. So what happens is lead goes from your bones and it goes from your blood to your bones. And so when we look at our maternal infant mortality rates, it's directly tied to lead poisoning, right? And then when we look at our hypertension, our kidney dialysis, our kidney failure rates, hypertension, kidney failure, and dementia, which disproportionately impact poor people, that is directly tied to lead poisoning as a child. And so most people think that lead poisoning impacts children and that's the end. They don't understand that it impacts you across your lifespan. And the other was manganese. Now, why is manganese so important? Manganese also causes neurological impacts. But for adults, what we see is high incidence of Parkinson's disease. And so what happens when we talk about African Americans and Parkinson's disease, less likely to be diagnosed at early stages of Parkinson's. Usually they're diagnosed after they've lost their ability to walk. And so for me, this is all about health. This is what I have done my whole entire career.
One other thing, so there's information about the African-American community. Ashtabula is diverse. So the other ethnicities
No, I'm talking
are
about everybody.
they charted? Okay,
I'm talking about everybody.
okay.
I talked to like the 13%, like the poverty rates, that's everybody. But then I gave you the higher rates for the African American community. But when I'm talking about Ashtabula, I'm talking about Ashtabula.
Ashtabula, okay, thank you.
And just, your organization actually is doing this in all 9 of the counties that you had listed? Wow, cool.
And so we've been in front of city council, actually, so Akron decided to create, I'm sorry. So Akron decided to create their own hub. So when we came out, Akron's like, yeah, we're gonna create our own, we're gonna create a hub because we want the community to be connected to that hub. And so what we hope is that all of these communities will say, we need to have a hub. Like, we need to have a hub where the community-based organizations, the community leaders, that means you all, the community leaders, the faith leaders, the government organizations, and the NGOs, the non-government organizations, know exactly what's going on, right? Because what happens is we have these emergency preparedness procedures that are individual, so they're siloed, right? And so a lot of these places don't talk until the emergency happens. When the emergency happens, it's too late. You need to have talk before the emergency, and emergency you all know, emergency management, we have to have it before, but it can't just be the systems talking. You actually have to talk to the community because we can't expect the community to actually understand resilience until they understand preparedness, right? Because the community is very resilient. They've been able to bounce back from a whole lot, but they're not prepared, right? And so that's what we're trying to make sure happens.
I want to thank you for coming, and I found your presentation very interesting. My name is J.P. Ducra. I'm one of the county commissioners, used to be a city council person for 5 years here. I'm going to give you my card because I'd like to have a sidebar conversation at a later time. I'm curious if there's any plans in the zoning remodifications of incorporating trees into that component? Because as our community, I mean, we're an older community. I see lots of trees that are dying, that are coming down in storms, that are being taken down because they're at risk or people are afraid they're going to come down and damage their property. But I don't see any coordinated effort to try to emphasize, encourage, or plan or require replacement.
It's, again, something that we're looking at in there, but again, it has to be the right species to do so.
Totally agree. And one of the big objections that I hear about trees and commercial spaces is the cleanup of the leaves, the debris that it may cause, and then the damage to infrastructure, buckling sidewalks or asphalt pavement. But I think one of the biggest travesties we have in our community is these large parking lots, asphalt jungles that have zero shade, and how hot they get. There's no place to park your car to keep it in the shade. There's no place for a loved one to sit in the car without leaving it running to stay cool, to have some shade of protection, and the minimal impact that I think it would have on the infrastructure over long periods of time compared to the benefits that it would create to just require it, after 40 parking spaces, you gotta have a tree. Something of that nature that I think could be incorporated into some planning that would not, I can't imagine, deter any business from opening here in our community, and ultimately I think it would be a big benefit and improvement. If we weren't going to do tree planting, maybe then some sort of shade structures that could maybe have solar panels on the top that could generate energy but also provide shade. You see that in some more progressive communities. So I hope that we can find more ways to engage and facilitate more green spaces. I think there's a lot of benefits with that, from just beauty to environment to comfort, health, all those sorts of things. So thank you very much.
Definitely. And what you were referring to is urban heat island effect. And so the urban heat island effects means that the asphalt and the sun have now met. And so literally you're getting the toxins from the asphalt, because when the heat hits the asphalt and you smell the asphalt, all of those are toxins coming from the asphalt. So the heat is coming from here and it's coming from below you. And so when it gets hot, you're getting it both ways. And so when you're like, I feel extra hot, yeah, and it's because you're in an area where all of this heat is all converging at one time. And so that is the urban heat island effect.
I welcome your information, but I question the statistical reality of 16 people from a county of 100,000. I don't think people, and Levette was kind of, I think, leaning toward this. I don't think people knew this was going on. And to me, I'm in an area with my business that has a bit of a flood risk. We've had issues with that. It'd be great if the government could come in and get rid of all the underpasses and stuff, because that's where the biggest flood risk is here. But I think that the heat and cold are much higher risks than the flood risk in Ashtabula. Most of the water runs into the river, and the river doesn't normally flood, at least from the stuff that I see.
I think the responses you got about flooding in Ashtabula are more people's basements flooding because of sewer backups, not necessarily,
that could
not
be too,
necessarily
yeah.
foundation issues, but sewer backups.
Yeah,
So,
okay,
yeah,
and
yeah.
that definitely is an issue
Yeah.
for some people, but if those
And
people
certainly the two
knew to come and
underpasses.
fill out a survey, then I think you statistically would have higher stuff than like when we got 5 foot of snow, and that was an emergency.
Yeah.
Now, fortunately in Ashtabula, we can handle emergencies like that, but, you know, I think the heat and the, not even necessarily the extreme cold, but sometimes the extreme snow is something that needs a little more discussion than some of the flooding issues.
Well, you know what? I think it depends on, you know, who's in the room. And that is the important part, is that we did invite everybody into the room. So people were invited into the rooms.
I don't know how they were
But
invited.
you
This is
have,
the first I've heard
you have the information right now, and so because you said your business is impacted, you can literally fill out the information and give it back to me, and it can be included on the sheet. And
So
so.
you're still in the, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you're still in the information gathering, so.
Exactly.
This presentation will continue to change as more people.
It'll
participate.
change as more people are giving their, you know, if they're saying, because remember, like, what they're looking at is they're looking at these geospatial maps. So they're looking at the government maps, where the government says that you're having issues. But I want to know what the people are saying, because what the community says is different than, because guess whose business is not included on the government geospatial map? Yours, sir. And so the only reason I can find out about your business is me coming here to say, you know, so what's going on with you all on the ground? Because the government can only look at stuff from this high, right? So it's looking at it from this level and it's saying that this is what's going on. And so for me, I want to know from the community members, so what do you say is going on? Like, what do you need to happen? And that's why we've spent so much time trying to make sure that we get the community involved. And then the other thing is, just so you know, that when you look at like a lot of like how dollars come into communities, it's like they're like having the 16 people or 20 people or 30 people that came into the room for the conversations was considered high, because you literally, in some of these meetings that are deciding millions and millions of dollars, whether it comes to your community, literally 5 people are in the room. Sometimes 2 people are in the room. And so I think that as far as that, you know, that we did a good job of trying to get people in the room, and then still trying to make sure that we get, because we didn't want to cut off anything until we found out what everybody wanted. And that's why I was so happy to meet with the councilwoman when we did the meeting at the library, because she said, hey, you know, I want you to come and tell council what you just told me. And so I think that that was important too. And so I appreciate you all bringing me here so that I can tell everybody, and hopefully you'll tell other people too. And because we'll have the PowerPoint, that you actually have that piece where you can go in and say, I need all my neighbors or all my people at church to go in here and fill this out and say the things that are going on.
And I want to follow up with that to make sure that I have the best way to do that. The city manager and myself just were at a community meeting less than a mile from here on the other side of the river, where there's some construction plans happening for some housing, and there were 40 people there concerned about flooding in a neighborhood that wasn't referenced on that sheet, in that presentation. And I'd love to give them an avenue because the solutions that have been, identified as possible fixes for some of these problems are multi-million-dollar solutions that are probably not realistic to have the funding to accomplish. Now, maybe there are some possibilities with some of the programs that you suggested, but I also think there may be some much smaller investments that could have an impact on these communities to help mitigate groundwater during severe weather events. So I'd really love to be able to get that out to that community, to those people, and let them feel like they've had a voice and get their responses tallied and be a part of this presentation. I think that would be very beneficial. And I also just want to take a minute to acknowledge two members of our emergency management agency. So a director and executive director, Mike and Tim, thank you guys for coming to at least be a part of, hearing what was talked about with emergency management. So appreciate you guys taking the time.
Thank you. And just so you know that all of them aren't multi-million-dollar fixes. Having rain gardens is not, a multi-million-dollar fix. Looking at like some of the other small home repairs or having educational resources, like those are easy things to do.
And that's what I mean, identifying those and finding ways to maybe get the funding to do those or to encourage people to use them. To get the funding to do those or to maybe encourage people to use them, make those investments themselves if they could understand how those little things incrementally might make a difference on their property or their neighbor's property. And now if a whole neighborhood does it, how can we impact even people further? So,
See, and that's the difficult part that we run into, and even with that conversation that we had with those residents, we look at, okay, here's the major problem that's going on, and here's the major fix to get it done. You referenced you're right by the underpass. The underpass floods all the time. The issue isn't in every case, we got to rip the road out and put a much bigger pipe in. I&I is getting in there. Rainwater is getting into our sewer system. Well, where's the bulk of that come from? Probably in the city of Ashtabula, probably 75% of that comes from downspouts and footer drains that are tied into our sewer system. So rather than the multi-tens and hundreds of millions of dollars replacing pipe, if people would disconnect their downspouts and disconnect their storm drains or their footer drains from the sanitary sewer, that would alleviate the flooding problems that we have. And I'll give you a for instance. Our wastewater treatment plant, on average, it's built for 22 million gallons a day. We peak at 24 million gallons a day, but on average, we're about 3 to 4 million gallons a day. When it rains, just a regular old rain, not a monsoon, we'll be at 17 million gallons in 2 hours, 3 hours. Now, that doesn't mean everybody got scared and ran and used the bathroom or jumped in the shower. That means rainwater is getting into our system. So we have to retrain our brains to think, well, it's not about putting bigger pipes in. We unfortunately have to knock on the homeowner's door and say, hey, there's got to be a separation here, and that's where the funding comes into play. We did the West 9th tributary, which is West 9th Street to Walnut Boulevard, Walnut Boulevard that wraps around to Lake Avenue. They tried to do that entire area when Mike Penna was here. They got hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of funding. And what they do is they go around and smoke the sewer system, and then I jokingly say you watch every house elect a pope because all the smoke comes out of the downspouts, and you know that home now, the sewer is tied into the storm. Well, you got to go knock on the door and say, that's probably a $10,000 to $15,000 separation if you're going to do it right. Now, who is going to have that because somebody just did a test? Well, that's why that grant funding was there. There were so many of those homes that were on it, they didn't even make it halfway through the project area because they had the funding to do the separation. So that's where we have to retrain our brains of, even though we are now in the midst of $160 million improvement to our sewer system and plant, the real still fix is going after the homes that are tied in, because that's where the source of the I&I comes from. And it's not just in the city. Remember, we take from Ashtabula Township, Saybrook Township, and Plymouth Township as well. So we have all of that coming to our plant.
Is it code in city that the gutters have to go into the drain tile?
No,
It is
no,
not.
it's
I
not.
think people misunderstand. I think
Yeah, well, the issue is the homes are so old here, that was acceptable back in the day. It was acceptable to have your storm going into the ground and into the sewer. And then it was in the 60s or 70s, the EPA came along and separated storm and sewer. And then a lot of those homes never got separated, so.
The code now is that they
The
have
code
to
now
separate
is,
it.
yeah. If there's a new home built, we have storm laterals that they can tie into, and we have sewer laterals they can tie into. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to echo some of the sentiments of thanking you for being here and presenting a lot of information. It was a lot of it was new for me, even after hearing it for the second time. And I also want to appreciate the Ashtabula County reps for actually being here, because I too think that a lot of times we operate in silos. And it's important for us to hear and come together so we can learn with and from each other and align whatever plans that we might have. And also appreciate the residents who are showing up and asking questions. And I appreciate the fact that there are multiple generations in the room, right? I applaud that. I do want to say that when I looked at the draft zoning plan, one of the first things that I'd mentioned that was on the plan is that in Ward 3, there's a lack of green space. And that's the ward that I represent. So I'm hoping that there's something that resonates with folks so that we can go back and rethink how do we make each of our wards safer places for us to live and breathe, because our health is definitely impacted by that. Question I have, I don't want to say are there samples of disaster preparedness plans, but is there like a process that you are recommending that people go through, or a template, so that when municipalities or whoever does create them, that we are considering those vulnerable communities and that they're not left out?
So part of that is the work of our hub. So basically what we're trying to figure out now is what are the emergency plans for all of the counties? So everybody's plan, and that's why we invited them to be part of that hub. So that they can tell us what the plan is, and then we can look for the gaps. So literally, which would mean the community-based organizations, the faith-based organizations, the community leaders, and remember y'all are leaders, the community leaders, the government organizations, and non-government. So we can literally all sit down, all look at the same thing within our counties and say, it's some gaps here. Like this, the community is not here. What's going on here? Like, what do we do about this? And so Akron saw it and said, we definitely have some egregious gaps, because a lot of times what happens is when we're planning things in the office is the office plan. So, you know, we think about the community when it happens, not before. And so it's important for the community to be included all along, because they can tell you where the gaps are. So, for instance, we just had a conversation in Lorain County, and we had about 75 people that came to that meeting, and 20 of them were young people under the age of 18. They had totally different information than the seniors. They were like, look, you're missing this. Where's the place for people with babies? We need to make sure that formula is available. What about diapers? The girls were like, well, what about sanitary stations? Like, we need to have, like, if you're having a plan, we need to have all of these things in place, because if you're bringing people to a building, they have to have all of these things. Otherwise, you know, they're going to be at a place where they don't have the things that they need. And so I think that when we're having these intergenerational meetings, it brings so much more to the table, because everybody has a different part. And so when we bring all those parts together, then the puzzle is completed. And so that's why, you know, having an emergency preparedness plan, and then everybody looking at it and saying, okay, where are we at in this plan? You know, how do you get to the east side? How do you get to the north side? Like when the Nature Conservancy talked at the library, and I was talking with him, and he said, you know, we want to do a resilience hub. And I said, oh, that would be great. And he said, well, we got this building, you know, we're going to retrofit it. And he said, but we can't get the community there. And I'm like, huh? And he said, yeah, you know, it's like 20 miles away from the community. It's like out in a remote area here. And he said, it's so far from the community. And I'm like, and he says, well, I guess I could talk to the schools about, could we use their buses to bring people there? And I'm like, I don't think that worked too well with Hurricane Katrina. Like, have you had conversations with the school before, about this, about the use of the buses, and will the buses be able to be utilized? And he said, I don't know. But, we're like, okay, well, let's go work on a plan. Like, how, if you open this resilience center, how will community members get there? And then he talked about, I'm like, and the resilience center has to have solar power, because you cannot depend on electric power, because if your electric grid fails and people are there because their electricity is off, then your electricity is off too. So that means that places that normally wouldn't have solar power, like churches, like we're talking to them and saying, hey, are you willing to get solar power on your church so that you can have a plug-in station, that you can have a refrigerator, so that you can have things that are operational, so that when something happens, the community members come there and that they're not, without missing the beat, they still got the things they need in order for them to live. Make sense?
I know more people are doing full house generators or generators in their businesses because we've had lots of outages. And so, they're not doing solar, but they are doing generators.
But, we've also had outages with generators where the secondary generator failed. And so it's like, okay, so what else can we do that works? And we know that solar works.
So, yeah, and solar and wind will both be in the new zoning, because the wind generators, turbines are getting smaller and smaller for home use.
And that's a great thing, because remember, they were huge.
Oh, yeah, yep.
I have one final question. You talked about emergency preparedness on, to me, a systemic level. Is there something on your site or in your presentation where people are actually talking about individual or family level preparedness as well?
Our community engagement person has the sheets around preparedness, so I can make sure that you get them. Yeah. And sometimes they're not on the site because I would be the one putting them up there, and like I'm in meetings or traveling a lot. So, but I will make sure that you get them.
I was just curious as to what individuals or families, how they fit into the overall.
There's a website, ready.gov, and it has everything for businesses or families or
And I think
any
that's what
type
he
of
gets.
emergency, winter, summer, flooding. Gives you templates, checklists. Anybody can go on there, just Google it and then.
Yeah, it's literally ready.gov. Just type that in.
That's where
Yep.
he gets it from, where our engagement person
Yeah,
gets it.
ready.gov is great. We get that out to a lot of people.
And that would be my question, how do we get it to folks? How it's more centralized so people can have easier access in addition to having it on the website? Because then you got to download and you got to print it out.
Everybody doesn't have access to the website, so I understand that, and that's why I was like, we gotta have stuff that's available in places where people can get to it.
Yeah, it's all printable too, so if somebody that can't get to it, somebody if they have a friend.
That's actually, excuse me, what I was going to ask as well. I know you had brought up, how do we get the information out, or do we have a messaging system for the community? And I noticed that you had shook your head, and I know this gentleman, Mr. Oquendo, has come up with an app where you can report things, or it's only for iPhones at this time, is that correct? It is for both. Okay. Last time you had talked about it, it was only available for iPhones. But in this, I think I'm familiar with this, but how do people get these flyers? Like,
Every place we go, they're on the county website,
Yeah.
they're on our website, they're on our Facebook page, we hand them out. It's been in place for years.
yeah.
I think we
So
have
people
those
can just
sheets
scan
at our
that
office
code,
too.
it'll
Yep.
take you right to sign up.
And then this is just for like
we
major
have 'em at our
emergencies or
offices.
disasters. This
Yeah,
wouldn't be,
we don't advertise like non-emergency stuff on there. We don't want people to get used to or get tired of hearing from us.
sure.
When there's an emergency, they don't pay attention, so it's only for emergencies. Now, other people have we have our webpage, we have Twitter, we put stuff out all the time. The sheriff just added an app that he's putting out what we put out. Most of the fire departments have apps now. I know the city does, you guys do. So a lot of people share once it's out there. We add it to ours, they add it to theirs, so quite a bit of the information is out. But that specifically is for emergencies.
And that's why we try to make sure that the churches have it, because if they have a copy, if they have it copied, then people can grab it while they're in there. Because everybody does not have access to phones to be able to scan things. And so, and because of that, we have to have it in a way where all of our communities can get a hold of it and say, you know, this is what I need to do, or this is what I need. Like, I do a domestic violence program. We do two a year. We do one in February, one in December, one in October. And we do these emergency preparedness bags for people who are in domestic violence situations. And we tell people, like, these are the things that you need. So they have the bag, but they also have the list of, like, if you're creating a bag, this is what you need. Because if you need to leave your home because of extreme weather, then you don't have time to go and grab up a bunch of stuff. So you need to have your stuff. Like, remember, you know, I don't know because I told y'all how old I am, you know, it was always have a flashlight. And so I always got a flashlight that I can go to and know I can turn it on and the batteries are working. Not that I'm gonna turn it on and it's like, oh, this ain't even working. I haven't even looked at this in years. But making sure that I have those things available because it's important. Because if the lights go off and I'm in the house, can I get access to this quick enough to be able to get some light to figure out what the heck is going on? So.
I'm still standing here. I was just listening to you, but no, I love your idea of being more proactive rather than reactive and, you know, just kind of cleaning up the mess, but, you know, preventing it from the beginning. You shared a wealth of information. I was computing and I still am, so thank you for coming to our community and sharing that. And I hope that maybe we're able to come up with different collaborations to get out and, like you said, Mr. Manager, to knock on doors to maybe inform people if they, you know, have their downspouts or whatever it is. There's so many things. That's only one thing that was mentioned here, but you know, I just have to give a kudos to Ms. Holman because she has shared, just like you said, you happened to connect with her and she brought you here. You know, she'll send me out flyers or information just letting me know about this meeting or this, whatever's going on. And it just allows me, I fall into the category of, you know, single parent family, full-time working, like I'm not reading the Star Beacon at home, you know, or catching up on all the details that other people may be able to, you know, capture. But, you know, if each one teaches one, you know, and shares that information, I think that our community will continue to improve and get better. And I just, I'm grateful, you know, to be a part of it, to be included. Thank you.
And if y'all need me to come back out
Yes, that's
anywhere,
what I was
just,
gonna ask.
if you need me to come back out, you can just reach out and we can come. You know, if you have a group, you know, not an individual one-on-one, you know, but if you have a group and you want us to come out and talk, the same thing and then get the input and feedback, we can. Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to share some positive things that have been going around with this subject. Master Gardeners of Ashtabula County took on the challenge to plant 250 native buckeye trees, and they have sold 250 native buckeye trees to be planted, all different sizes and levels. We put 2 in at the Ashtabula school site, so there's trees growing there. And so there's one, there's trees coming. Hopefully they're growing. The other part is I belong to Zonta International, the Ashtabula Club, and we did make those go bags. And we did them at the district level in Southern Ohio, and then we brought it back and did it at our Ashtabula Club and distributed the bags to different homes with all the things you need. If there's an emergency like right now, grab that bag and it's got everything you need. So things are happening on a personal level.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Linda. All right, so you are welcome to stay for the rest of our meeting, and if you wish to leave, we understand that as well. But thank you. Lots of great information, very informative, and we appreciate you.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, Parks and Recreation, we have that report.
I'll be talking about that a little bit too. All right, for the Parks and, my name is Anthony Oquindo. I'm with the Parks and Recreation Board, and I'm here to give an update. So we met
last Wednesday, a week ago today. The Ashtabula City Parks and Recreation Board has been actively working on several park-related issues, community events, and improvement opportunities that directly support quality of life, public safety, tourism, and economic development within the city. One of the board's major recent successes was the return of the Memorial Day Parade and ceremony. Despite ongoing construction and logistical challenges, the event was well attended and positively received. The board now has a strong planning.
Mr. Quendo, would you mind just pausing temporarily until we
Yes.
can?
Yep.
Yeah, thank you.
One of the board's major recent successes was the return of the Memorial Day Parade and ceremony. Despite ongoing construction and logistical challenges, the event was well attended and positively received. The board now has a strong planning baseline for future years, including better forms, participant lists, traffic control lessons, and opportunities for earlier public communication. The ceremony also included meaningful recognition of local veterans in the beginning of the Ashtabula Veterans Row of Honor. The board continues to focus on making city parks more inviting, safer, and better programmed. There was a significant discussion regarding park rules, signage, and enforcement, particularly at Lance Corporal Kevin Cornelius Memorial Park. Recent concerns included damage of the gazebo, litter, bicycles being placed on or around the gazebo, inappropriate behavior, a recent assault near the gazebo, and general concerns about preserving the dignity of memorial spaces. The board also noted a recent Ashtabula Police Department arrest at South Park involving apparent drug activity. The board is requesting review of applicable park ordinances and signage so rules are clear, reasonable, and enforceable. The board also is aware of the recent drowning at Walnut Beach. This is a serious concern, and the board is researching protective warning and response methods that may help improve public awareness and safety at the beach. While no single system can eliminate every risk, the board believes it is important to review available options, including beach warning systems, public notification tools, and emergency response improvements, and other reasonable safety measures that could help protect residents and visitors. Also regarding Walnut Beach, resident Ryan Humphreys called into the meeting and provided an update on the skate pavilion project. Ramps from a Red Bull-related project have been made available. Volunteers have already assisted with cleanup, and Home Depot has indicated a willingness to donate stain once proper city review and approval steps are followed. The board expressed support for this project and for reasonable volunteer-driven improvements while recognizing the need to follow city procedures and coordinate with the city manager and applicable review processes. The board sees this as an opportunity to activate an underused space, attract youth and families, and create positive energy at Walnut Beach. Additional discussions include broader improvements at Walnut Beach, such as bocce courts, horseshoe areas, restroom and concession building concerns, and continued volunteer private sector partnerships. The board also discussed the importance of increasing Parks and Recreation's visibility at public events. With Union Pacific Big Boy 4014 expected to return through Ashtabula on July 13th, the board discussed obtaining a Parks and Recreation tent, table cover, and trifold brochures or public information handouts. The goal is to better promote city parks, board projects, volunteer opportunities, and future programming. This type of outreach can help residents and visitors better understand what Ashtabula parks offer. Several maintenance and safety concerns were also reviewed. Nappy Field has reported vandalism and bench concerns. East 48th Street has possible safety issues, including sharp metal edges, which is, Jim, that's what I passed to you, some pictures, yeah. Sharp metal edges on the slide, missing equipment, fencing issues, and the swing set that appears to be at its breaking point and poses a safety risk to the kids that use it and a liability to the city. Gaydon Park was discussed regarding playground equipment and myself, Anthony Oquendo, reported that he became aware of a beehive in the pavilion area and used available contacts to have the hive and bees humanely relocated. This protected both park users and the bees. South Park was noted as looking cleaner and improved, although continued attention is needed. The board discussed upcoming and possible programming, including bands on the beach, potential concerts in the park, and a West 38th Street Park movie night planned by co-chair Blake Hinkle for July 17th, featuring a Goofy movie. The board sees positive programming as one of the best ways to reclaim public spaces, encourage family use, and reduce negative activity. The Parks and Recreation Board currently has one vacancy. This vacancy is appointed by the city manager. The board is looking for a forward-thinking, action-oriented, results-oriented person who will add to the current positive chemistry and momentum of the board. The board is especially interested in someone who brings ideas, follow through, and wants to help move the city's parks forward. Overall, the board is focused on practical improvements, stronger communication with the city, better follow through on maintenance concerns, increased volunteer and private sector involvement, improved safety awareness, and more visible programming in city parks. These efforts support economic development by improving public spaces, strengthening community pride, attracting visitors, and making Ashtabula's parks safer and more welcoming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Question.
Does anyone have any questions?
I was at Walnut Beach a couple days ago, and I went down there because I thought I read something about Food Truck Mondays. And then on my way home, I saw two at Smithfield and figured that's where I'd read. Okay. But the concession stand at the beach, is it open? I didn't see it open that day.
Which day was it?
Monday. Yeah, I saw.
Supposed to be there 12 to at least 5.
Okay, all right. So it is open, okay, that's good. Thank you.
I have a question on the ability of using youth opportunities students for any park cleanup projects or work. Is there any issues or concerns with that? I know
We've partnered with ATAC to do all the landscaping over at Veterans Park and Cornelius Park. So
Okay.
we've had volunteer groups come in and work side by side with our staff as well. So I'm not opposed to that.
And just the preference would be to coordinate that if there's a project that's happening so that staff from the city could be there as well.
Right, so
to
we can
be able
help
to do
with,
that.
any type of removal or, we
And
know
make
the
sure if
grounds.
there's
Yes.
something that isn't the way that it should be done, someone's
Yes.
kind of supervising that, that would be helpful. Okay.
That's correct.
How many people currently are hired under the Parks levy?
So there are 3 full-time and 2 part-time persons.
Part-time seasonal people than
Seasonal,
just for the
yes,
summer?
Correct.
Okay. And is there a, like how does that work? Like, is there, like, I know they mow the grass, but like, what's the capacity for them to do for edging and bush trimming and weeding and that sort of thing? Is it just a manpower issue because
Most
of
of it's a
the
manpower issue,
quantity?
so a lot of it is the mowing of the 13 parks that we have. Trimming of those 13 parks, and then the other items that we have to take care of that they do. Combing, the beach cleaning, that takes quite a while to do with the beach cleaner. So there are, and then just the regular maintenance that we do in all the parks as well, so.
And that's why it's probably really helpful and important to find some volunteer projects to do some of the heavier lifting stuff, like a big one-off where you could do a big cleanup, and then it's much smaller things that
Much
they could
smaller to
probably
maintain afterwards, yes.
handle for maintenance purposes. And do you think there's ever a possibility of shifting from the 3 full-time in that division, which is parks not being needed as much care and attention during the winter 6 months of the year,
So the parks people only, it's only April through October. And then they're back in Public Works. There's not much that we're
Okay.
doing in the parks between that time. Yeah.
Gotcha. So their compensation is basically
For
2
9
people,
months.
6 months, or
Yeah,
9,
yeah, yeah.
okay.
Mhm.
So it's broken out that way?
Yes.
Okay. And I thought, and I don't know how, I guess the city, they're probably just with city uniform, there's a uniform requirement, I assume, for Public
So
Works people?
we just did, now it's a yellow shirt with the logo on it. Yeah.
Okay. That's something I think would be really impactful if people saw something that stood out while people were in the parks, doing the parks. And that's just why I always wish that there was, maybe more part-time help. So like in the summertime, there's almost a person at one of the parks every day visible. It seems like that would be, there's just so much. There's just so much.
It's a lot to maintain 13 parks.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I would like to, I'd like to propose a project for the 10th, Friday the 10th, a week from this coming Friday.
We can coordinate that. Yep.
Okay, and then what's the appropriate way to solicit volunteers? Can I make an announcement asking for that now, or just put that out in social media or whatever?
Yeah.
Is that okay, Chair of the Parks Committee?
Absolutely.
I'd like to see if anybody would like to help or be available to help and work on a project at South Park, coordinating with the city and the Public Works and Parks Department to weed, edge, mulch, trim bushes, clean up the gutters, weed the sidewalks, pick up the branches, and try to do a whole makeover on that. And I think if we got 20 or so people together, we could beautify that park in a day easily. What's that? I'd say be there by 9 o'clock in the morning on Friday, the 10th.
I put the message out at 8:30, okay. 9
That's okay.
o'clock.
It's okay. You can say 8:30. I mean, my thought is that a few of the core people get a chance to kind of get there and get organized, but maybe
Okay.
we can even do that the day before, and then as people arrive, we can give them direction on where we need to go from there.
And what do they need to bring with them?
I mean, if they have a spade of some sort, if they want to bring a weed eater, probably protective goggles would be good. Gloves would be good, because there could be some
Do we
poison
still
ivy
have
over there.
gloves left over, Jim, from the cleanup?
I do not know, but we can look right after the meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not anticipating that we need to provide everybody with everything. I mean, whatever you'd use to go and weed your garden. I mean, if you're gonna take care of your own personal property, and it shouldn't be, many hands will make light work, but I think, I think we can do some very attention to detail work over there. I have an edger, if somebody has, a really good quality weed eater, an
We have
edger
a
that can
power
edge
edger.
along. Yeah, those, I think,
So
doing the
we'll get
sidewalks are
together and
great.
coordinate equipment, materials, everything we need before that, so we can have it all ready for the day of.
Perfect, thank you so much.
And I just might add, I'm not sure if the City of Ashtabula also already has an application into the ATEC folks, but if they provide that, then the board meets and that partnership is established so that students can go out and help and also get paid for their time.
Wait, back up, say
This
that?
is, Youth Opportunities, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
yo, I
yeah.
thought you said
Youth
ATEC.
Opportunities. Well, Yo is a part of ATEC.
Oh,
It's
I didn't know that.
yeah, it's a partnership they have with them, but I'm referring specifically to Youth Opportunities as,
I'm gonna reach
You
out
go
to
for it.
Shay. We have a couple of
Yeah.
youth opportunity kids on that
Great.
help us out at
wonderful.
our business, and I'll bring them as well as
Great.
reach out to Shay as well.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm just saying, I think it's a great idea for future projects that the city might have to be able to use those students in that way. Mr. Aquendo, thank you very much for the Parks report. I have just a quick question. Is there a temporary fix at all that can be offered for some of these cut rough edges so that students don't get hurt or cut while they're playing? If we don't have a long-term plan yet, just a short-term fix for some of these cut edges.
We're gonna have to go out and look at that depending on the conditions. This is why it's important not to wait for meetings, but to let us know right away when issues come up, if we haven't seen it already. But we'll have to go out and look at those conditions and see whether it just needs to be removed or we can bend some things
I
around
think
or file it
I
down.
had emailed you in April, I had emailed this all to you in April.
I don't recall that, but I'll
And this is,
check it out.
which park is this again?
That is the
East 48th Street.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Any new business? Any unfinished business? So our next meeting is August 5th, and the subject is going to be, I don't know if you say data or data centers. So that's all we got. And thank everybody for coming.